I will start with Mr. John Chambers. John Chambers is the chairman and CEO of Cisco. He served as vice chairman of President George W. Bush, National Infrastructure Advisory Council. Hi, sir. Let me just get your bio first.
Okay.
All right. And he was in George W. Bush transition team and education committee and the President Bill Clinton Trade Policy Committee. Chambers has received numerous awards of his leadership, including the 2012 Bauer Awards for Business Leadership from the Franklin Institute. Time magazine named him one of the 100 most influential people, one of Business Week top 225 executive worldwide, and CEO of the Year by Chief Executive Magazine. Under his philanthropic leadership, Cisco has received the U.S. State Department's Top Corporate Social Responsibility Award, ACE, twice, and the first ever Clinton Global Citizen Award. Hello, Mr. Chambers.
Judy, it's a pleasure.
You have a microphone?
And if you would call me John, I'd appreciate it. That way I won't feel old or formal.
All right, great.
All right.
So, John, from the weird fact that I mentioned in the start, which one is yours?
I married my high school sweetheart. Took me 7.5 years to convince her to marry me.
All right, that's nice. Let's start with Israel. You know, we Israelis very like and we love that people will tell us good things about us. So, in such a problematic time, why does Cisco find Israel attractive?
We had a conversation with your prime minister a year ago and with Shimon Peres in the year before that, and we shared how we thought countries were going to evolve in the future, who was going to lead, who would fall behind. It was about education, it was about broadband, the new highways, if you will, of the future. It was about innovation as a society, supportive government working together. And if you do that right, you can change jobs, you can change inclusion in terms of the Arab population. You can change education, healthcare. And the Prime Minister basically said, what does it take to do this? And to his credit, he had the courage to say, we want you to take the leadership role here, want you to work with the ministries. We came back 1 year later. We've delivered on every commitment. And that's really what I talked to both the Prime Minister about, the President, and each of the ministries.
So you're speaking about digitize Israel. What does it mean? You told me a few minutes ago that one of the things is that you want to bring electricity through the internet. Explain that.
Sure. If you think about what the internet does, all it does is move around data in the forms of 0 and 1s. What you're going to talk about for the future is it just won't be video over the internet or voice over the internet. Everything will go. It will completely change education models. It will completely change supply chain models. It will change healthcare that will probably allow Israel to perhaps provide a dramatically higher quality of healthcare at a dramatically lower cost. It will determine which countries survive and which ones get left behind. And to answer your question on electricity, it will move over just like the 0s and 1s.
The 0s and 1s, but this is not something physical?
No, it isn't. It's virtual, and that's really what cyber is about.
All right. As the founder of one of the world's largest companies, what is the explanation of the world economic crisis? Everyone tells us that everything is fine, but everything doesn't work.
Well, it's kind of a mixed view. If I were to not comment about my own stock performance or how we're doing in the quarter, we see the U.S. recovering. We saw it turn up about 5 quarters ago. We started buying companies. We bought 15 companies in the last 15 months, so clearly we're all in. We see Northern Europe gaining momentum, Germany, Eastern Europe, Russia in good shape, Southern Europe is as bad as you hear, maybe even worse. Asia a little bit mixed, which is surprising at this time of year. It's really going to come down to can the U.S. and China economic engines pull the rest of the world out of this slowdown.
I know that maybe I'm putting you on the spot here on the stage, but...
I'm used to it, as long as I can reverse roles.
I want to use your experience. When our politician here in Israel tells us that our economy is stable and that it's in a great shape, do they tell the truth, or does that want us to make feel better?
I've never seen a country as critical of yourselves as this country. And
I will take that as a compliment.
Yeah, so to have 4% GDP growth in this environment is very good. Now, having said that, if you don't change, you will get left behind. And that's what we're really talking about, having the courage to change as a country, much what all three speakers, whether it was Tony Blair or Bill Clinton or Prime Minister Netanyahu said about Shimon Peres. He had the courage to change, look at the long term, think like a teenager, and take risk. And I think that's what this country has to do. But I think you're plenty critical on yourself.
Yeah, and so you think we're in a good shape?
No.
All right.
I think if you rest on your laurels, you're going to get left behind.
So what should we do? You know, a lot of people speak about Israel as the startup nation, which it is, but
yes.
Is startup is yesterday? What is Israel tomorrow? What should we invest now to get the fruits of the new tomorrow?
So let me first put it in terms that I'm familiar with, my own company, to give you a feel for it. Then it's the exact same scenario, just on a higher scale for the country of Israel. My competitors from 15 to 20 years ago, probably 40 of them are all gone. From 10 to 15 years ago, only one's left, and I'm going to get them this year. From 5 to 10 years ago.
Is that a promise, or?
That's a promise.
Okay.
Alcatel, Lucent, Nortel, Siemens, great companies, and we blew by them. And we're now breaking away from all of our peers. Stock's up 50%. We're gaining market share in 9 of our 10 largest categories. If we don't change, 2 years from now, we'll be roadkill. We'll get left behind. And so this is a brutal environment we're in, where the speed of change, because of the connectivity that Thomas Friedman and others talk about, is 5 to 10 times faster than before. And countries who don't know when to change or when to reinvent themselves will struggle. And companies who don't know when to change or reinvent will get left behind. They'll just go out of business. Probably 40% of the Fortune 200 today will not exist in 25 years, will not exist in a meaningful way.
So what is the next thing? Is it still high-tech? Is it clean energy?
No, I think those are transactions. Those are areas that will be interesting markets to be in, but they aren't going to support a global economy or even a country's economy. I think the next thing is what you're beginning to read about. You hear about cloud and mobility and video and social networking, et cetera. Those are really looking backwards. The next things will be how you connect all the devices in the world in ways we've never done before. There were 200 million devices connected to the internet 10 years ago. The power of a network is the number of devices squared. There are 12 billion today. I think there'll be 500 billion in 12 years. That's going to generate an economy with probably $14 trillion in profits for business in the next 10 years. So the companies and the countries who get this right, who build an environment of a next generation startup, who build a foundation based upon fiber and mobile, who really change their ecosystem in healthcare and education, have, I think, a huge leg up on the rest of the world. Israel's going to take the chance to make that happen. And we all know as we do this, we'll get second-guessed by critics. There'll be starts and stops. But I think this is about the country's future. I'm all in on Israel.
All right. Here in Israel, we've experienced a phase where the public seems to take pleasure when rich and powerful people and their companies run into financial difficulties. Can you understand or explain that?
Absolutely. I think if a company is making very good money, is a great place to work, and we're often the number 1 or 2 place to work in the world, and you're returning, your shareholders are benefiting, your customers are happy, I believe in getting paid well. If it's an executive or a company that you're losing money, you're laying off people, you're not positioning the company for the future, you shouldn't be paid at all. So if executives win either way, that's not fair, and that's what causes public resentment. Most people in America or Israel don't mind success, but they have a real problem paying people when they aren't being successful and doing the wrong things for society.
Yes. Do you see a problem by the fact there's a widening gap between the wealth of the rich and the poorer, the poor that get poorer? How do we address that problem?
Well, I travel around the world. I've had the good fortune to call almost every government leader in the world and most all the business leaders. Every government leader in the world is worried about jobs and inclusion and the widening gap between the have and have-nots. They're worried about it partially because it's the right thing to do, but the real reason they're worried, this calls social unrest. So if you don't develop a middle class and share in a country, you're going to have not only a change in administrations, you may have a violent overthrow. And so you're seeing people around the world realize that the middle class has to be put back into play. In my opinion, the only way that you're going to get a stable Palestinian opportunity in the future is to build a middle class there. We invested heavily about 4 years ago in the high-tech industry. It was 0.5% of their GDP was high-tech. Today, it's 6.5%. If we can take that to 15 or 20, we create a lot of jobs within the area, and that causes stability in a country. And then you have a peer that basically it's a win-win in terms of the opportunities.
Let's speak about vision. Shimon Peres in the past couple of years has talked about global or international corporates that will replace governments. Can you see that as a visual solution? Cisco will deal with the problem of hunger in Iran or water problem in Egypt?
Each of the companies have unique strengths. A Coca-Cola can deal with the water issue, and they do that remarkably well. What Cisco can do is we can generate jobs by the millions. And we know how to do that. If you watch, you had to be in the past generation. If you didn't have the right education, if you weren't in the right city or country, you didn't participate in the global economy. That's going to change. And with the power of the internet, with the structure I talked about, you're going to see more of a leveling opportunity on the global economy. And I think you're going to see, if we do this right, most of the nations rise in a very positive way over the next decade or two.
You know, a week ago, another Israeli startup company, Waze, was sold to Google. And I think that a lot of people sitting here, and a lot of people sitting back at home, thinking to themselves, dreaming about such a success. What would you advise them? Keep on working hard to achieve this dream, even if it takes years? Or maybe we'll tell them the truth that only few achieve this dream?
The answer is both. If you watch out of all of our peers, as I said before, the top 40, 20 years ago, only one survived. And part of that is good fortune. Part of it's being in the right industry at the right time, and I'll take good luck anytime. I think as a country, you'll generate more startups than any other country except the U.S. Per capita, you're going to probably go 10 times the number of startups versus the U.S. And so that creates jobs. I think each person has to decide, depending on which industry of technology you're in, is this an industry that's going to consolidate and play together architecturally, like NDS did with Cisco on video, in which case stand by yourself, very low chance of success. The right thing for the employees, your customers, your shareholders combined. There may be other new hot ideas, the next Google, the next Cisco, the next Microsoft. And those have to have the courage to roll the dice, if you will, and take a risk. But it is taking a risk.
But do you think those companies like Cisco, like Google, like Facebook, can really replace, when I spoke about replacement of government, can you see this as emerging power that can deal with problems like we're facing here in the Middle East?
The answer is yes. I think Shimon saw this almost 5 or 6 years before I really understood what he was talking about. He understood that to create peace in the Middle East, to eliminate the majority of the unemployed, to eliminate a lot of the inclusion issues of minorities, companies could move with the speed that governments cannot. And this is what your prime minister, your president, and candidly each of the ministries such as finance, economy and trade, communications, education understand that together in public-private partnerships you can do something you cannot do otherwise. And you can change the world. In fact, if you look at our badge, you want to know what Cisco does? We do 3 things well. We get market transitions right, technology or economic. We listen to our customers, and when we see the two intertwine, that's where innovation happens. And our values and cultures are on every Cisco person's belt. When you listen to this, think how close this is to what Israel does. Change the world, focus intensely on customers, make innovation happen, win together, respect and caring for each other, and always do the right thing. That's our values, that's our culture.
And I will add to that, pray to God that no one will shoot rockets on us.
Thank you very much, Edi.
John Chambers, thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This is all tech.